You're listening to the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Wyatt. Did you know that if you're in finance and things are slow, you might just become famous on TikTok? It's a true story. It could happen. Like to our guest today, Trent Ellis on the show.
Mississippi Outdoors is sponsored by Entergy Mississippi. Entergy is building a stronger and cleaner grid to power a brighter future and protect our great outdoors for generations to come.
You're listening to the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Wyatt. And today, somebody who you most likely follow, judging by the numbers on social media. He is our own Mississippian from all the way Mantachie originally.
Mantachie.
Mr. Trent Ellis. Trent, welcome to the show.
Thank y'all for having me.
So, Mantachie, it all goes back to Mantachie for you.
Man.
Is that Lee County or Itawamba?
Etowamba.
Oh, sorry, Etowamba County.
Hey, look, we're in Mississippi. We all have different translations and dialects here. So I met a guy yesterday from the South Mississippi, not from California, that said, when he found out where I was from, he said, I can't even say that. Talking about Etowamba County. He's like, I don't even think it's a real place. I said, it's real, brother. I can show you on the map.
Yeah. Well, not far from Tupelo, kind of between Tupelo and Fulton, for those that don't know there.
That's right.
And it all goes back there for you. So we'll fill in the gaps later, but now fast forward, and here you are in 2025. You're kind of a viral. Is it fair to say kind of a viral sensation, social media, that kind of following?
Man, it sounds good, but I don't even know if that's true.
Well, then how do you describe it then? Like if you run into a stranger and they say, what do you do?
I tell them I do some stuff on social media and I do finance. That's it.
Okay.
Just like that, man. Because, I mean, that's all that kind of stuff is relative. But, I mean, as far as like what's viral and what's not, and to be honest with you, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just know that I've got to put out so many videos a week and do the work, and I'm just going to let the good Lord, kind of do what he wants to with it, whether he shows 10 people or 10 million.
Yeah. How many videos a week do you do?
6. Monday through Saturday, I try to have I try to shoot them in one day or 2 days, and then sometimes like turkey season, deer season, I get super busy with travel or whatnot, and I'll be day to day. But I try to get them Monday through Saturday, new videos out every day.
Well, okay, and it's that there may be some listening that thinks, a video a day, that can't be that hard. There's a lot that goes into it, isn't it? I mean, that is a lot.
Especially when I first started out. So I've been doing this since August 24th of 2023.
Okay.
And I would say my first 6 months, probably the first year, honestly, it's just kind of you just got to get it. You got to go in there and try a bunch of different things and figuring out editing and figuring out how the algorithm works. And I still don't have everything figured out, but I've got a much better understanding of what those things are looking for, the audience is looking for and everything. So, but yeah, man, I mean, it's sometimes, depending on what kind of video I'm doing or where I'm doing it, sometimes it could take 30 minutes from start to finish, editing and everything, and sometimes it could take 3 hours. So either way, it's just, it's got to be done.
Would you consider yourself a YouTuber? I hear that term, but a YouTuber?
No, I mean, I feel like YouTubers just do YouTube and they got their following from YouTube.
Okay.
I got my following more on the short form side of stuff like Facebook and TikTok. Yeah. Now I have a YouTube page and I think I've got about 130,000 subscribers on there, and I've gotten long form content. But my best content is my skits and reels that I put on YouTube Shorts.
Okay. Shorter videos.
Right. So I'm trying to get in that YouTuber category to where I can put out, 20-minute videos and then do 100,000 plus views, whatnot. But, I think it's just folks in my county right now watching that stuff.
and some family members and things like that.
Yeah.
Well, and Instagram as well.
Right.
Hefty, 250,000 followers there or something like that.
Something like that.
I don't know the numbers specifically, but I'm fascinated by all of it, how you got started. Like, was it you woke up one day and went, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do short form? Or did you wake up with the idea and it sort of took off in another way? Like, how did it start for you is what I'm asking.
So finance I've been doing finance since 2020.
Okay.
And I got investment licensed. I was insurance licensed in 2020, and I got investment licensed in 21, Series 6, 63, and 26. And so 2023 or 2022, I got my first school district where I could do a 403B for them, which is like a 401k. And in 23, I said, I'm going to go around all of North Mississippi, and I'm going to get as many school districts as I can to help, do an additional 403B for the teachers and such. Mm-hmm. And that's going to help them, with their investments, and that's going to help me with residual income. Every time somebody's investing $100, $200 a month and whatever. And I'm like, I'm going to go around. I'm going to burn the pavement up. I'm going to get at least one more, and that'll help. And dude, I didn't get a single district. I mean, really? They looked at me and they were just like, you were not, I mean, they didn't say this, but you could tell they're like, I don't want to talk to you about this. Yeah, sure. We'll call, whatever. And
don't call us. We'll call you.
Yeah. And it was kind of slow, man. Mm. And I haven't been I've kept up on I didn't even have TikTok at the time. Didn't have it. Didn't like people who did it.
In 22?
23.
So in 23 didn't have it.
23 didn't have it. And I watched Facebook Reels, YouTube Shorts, and that was pretty much it. Okay. So Justin Nunley started coming up on my feed. And I want to say it was right there at the beginning of August of 23. I was in a school district, and I was in a certain school, and I was sitting in the break room, and this was a district that they said, we're not going to allow you to be one of our 403B providers per se, but we like you and we'll allow you to go into the school, sit in the break room. The teachers can talk to you if they want to,
okay.
And so I was sitting there, and this was my third school in that district in 3 days. And I had nobody come to talk to me. And I'm pissed. Mm. I'm just, because you can't be mad at anybody but the situation in that environment or whatever. And Nunley was coming up on my stuff, and I was like, man, this dude's funny. And I saw a podcast dated back in 2022.
Okay.
So he just come up on my feed. Now I see a podcast from a year prior, and in that podcast, they're asking him the money he's making. And they're like, what'd you average last year in 21? And he was like, about 25 grand a month. And I'm like, are you, he just came up on my feed. Mm-hmm. So 2 years ago, obviously you ain't got to be the most famous person in the world to make a little scratch on there. And I thought, well, shoot, fire, man. I'm from one of the craziest states in the country. We got some characters here. I got some stories. I think I could possibly go on there and put some relative, relatable content out there for people to laugh at. And
okay, and that moment right there. Okay, so you got a little bit of a Genesis moment going on. And my first thought is the guts that it takes to do it the first time, and that first whatever you put out there. What was the first thing, and how did it do?
So the first thing was I had a 2-character video, and I remember I was going over Dopey.
Okay.
I think is what it was. Asking about Dopey. And I had seen these creators do this stuff to where every time the camera would cut back to a certain character, they'd have a different shirt or something added to them. And I was adding stuff. I was taking fake plants off the piano and putting it in the back of my cap and everything. And I think it was 20 seconds, 30 seconds long, and it probably got a couple thousand views, 1,000 views, nothing big. But I did that. I told my wife, I said, I came home, I'll back up a little bit. I came home after watching that interview because I stayed in the break room and I just started writing ideas down. I was like, I'm going to try this. And I told Bree, I said, look, I'm going to download TikTok. And I'm going to try this for 7 days. I don't know how to make money on here. I don't know how to do any of that. I just know that I'm just going to try it for 7 days. And if I don't hate it, I'm going to keep going. Mm. And she's like, Trent, you don't respect guys that do this stuff. And I'm going to be honest, how could I respect you for doing this? And I told her about Nunley's deal, and I said, well, honey, if I was making 10 grand a month on it, do you think you could respect me then? And she's like, well, you're not making 10 grand a month now. So, and I'm like, well, let me just try it out. So, of course, you fast forward, and now she's trying to tell me how to do my skits. She's like, or have you done a video today for tomorrow? You know, you're going to be gone this weekend, so you need to kind of bank them up, you know.
She's coaching you up.
She's coaching me. But yeah, so, you know, so I downloaded TikTok that day, and I started doing it for a week. And in that week, I was focusing on, you know, just Southern culture. I think that week I went over and did Southern phone calls. You know how you'll sit there and call somebody. There's those guys that call, hey, what's going on, man? Long pause. Oh, nothing much. What you up to, bud?
Right.
Oh, you know, ain't you know, just a bunch of vowels, you know,
right.
with just a phone call about nothing. And I had my uncle's friend, he saw me somewhere, and he come up to me and he said, dude, that's us, man. That's what we do. Yeah. I'm telling you. And it was like in that moment, I was like, it gave me enough validation that I was reaching somebody.
You're like, this is resonating in a real way with somebody.
And just getting that feedback, I was like, man, let's do it. Let's just keep going, see what happens. And that's been my mentality from day one, was just, you know, do the work and let the Lord do what he wants to with it. So that's kind of what I've been doing this whole time, man, is just, you know, doing the work, figuring it out. And I've met a couple of, I just sat down with a guy last night, Zach Rushing. He's a comedian. He's been in the game for 5-6 years. And he gave me a lot of advice and wisdom on things. And him and about 2 other guys have given me pointers and stuff like that to kind of look at, you know, as far as posting and all the analytical things you have to look at, the insights that have helped me a little bit. But, you know, for the first year, I would say it was just me, just figuring it out, just like didn't know anything about uploading to Facebook with a TikTok watermark on it. You know how bad that is for it, and double posting this. And I didn't know any of that. I mean, I was on TikTok. I think the first month I was on there, I probably got 3 or 4 strikes because I had guns on there. I had knives. I was doing everything. And then they're taking it down. And I'm like, what's going on with this? But I was talking about shooting a horse in my neighbor's pasture with my 17 right there in the picture. In the picture.
You're learning some of those lessons the hard way, I guess, so to speak.
My daddy always said, son, you'll learn the hard way.
He knew.
He knew, and he's right.
Okay, but you've said this phrase a couple of times, doing the work.
Right.
You know, just kind of putting the work in, which is, again, it staying on schedule, putting the content together. You know, something else too that stands out to me, the guts to do it. There's a courage and a guts that goes along with it, because even now, huge following, even now you could do something that stinks.
Yeah.
But you're not afraid of that, are you?
Every week it happens. Every week I'll get on there, and it's, you know, and that's also relative. You know, what stinks now was amazing when I first started, but it's, especially being in finance, man, any kind of, when you start out, if you're selling insurance, when you start out, you learn real quick to get thick skin and to be told no. And you learn to fail, unless you're just one of the lucky ones. I was not one of the lucky ones. I had a little bit of success, but for the most part, I had to pick up the phone. I had to make phone calls. I had cancellations all the time, kind of like a realtor, you know? And everybody sees that one guy or those couple that have been doing it for 10 plus years that are making bank and all this kind of stuff. But they have no idea what they went through in those first 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Sure.
That first and second and really third year toughened my skin up enough. And I had just gotten into that mentality of just don't quit, keep working and don't quit. If it's meant to be, it'll be, but just don't quit. Because if you quit, it definitely ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
You're definitely not gonna win. You know, it's not gonna come true, whatever that is. So I was already used to being told no. I was used to failing, you know, by my standards. And I thought, what's the real risk of doing this? If I get on here and I'm a bad actor, or I've got bad content, nobody's watching it or whatever, they're going to, you know, point and say, what does Trent do? All the people that know me, you know, because that's all it would be, is like, what does he think he's doing? You know, he trying to be TikTok famous, which I heard that anyway. You know, I heard that for the first 3 or 4 months that I started doing it. You trying to be TikTok famous, you know, and all this kind of, and then those same people are calling me a year later asking, hey, I'm thinking about putting a video up. You got any, you know, you got any pointers or anything like that?
I thought you were going to say they call you asking to borrow money.
I've had that too. I've had that too.
I bet.
But yeah, man, it's just, I told myself, I said, if people, you know, seeing that I've tried something and it didn't work out and there's no financial risk to me or my family, there's literally, the only thing is upside. That's you know, there's only upward potential for this.
So you began by just using your phone?
I still just use that.
You use your phone.
That's it.
So again, there's really not much overhead then.
My overhead would be in like laptop, hard drives. When I got into long form, that's where the overhead came into play.
Sure.
Because you need a camera, you need a hard drive or two, and you need a good computer and all that kind of stuff. But no, very, very little overhead, which my dad, he is, I mean, he is so frugal, and he's tried to teach us a lot about money and all this kind of stuff since we were real little. He's so frugal that he keeps his tailgate down in his Ford Ranger to get an extra tank of gas a year.
You know, and I feel like that's a Mississippi thing, because for a little bit, I went and I worked for a tech company, and they would spend money at the like drop of a dime to you know, buy like the biggest and best thing, even if it wasn't going to do anything for them. But yeah, I was so used to like having jobs in Mississippi before I did that like my employer buys me a camera and then you just got to make do.
Yeah.
I always, but I realized when I was working with these other people that I felt like, man, maybe that's really just a Mississippi thing, where I just feel like I got to make the best of what I have.
It's a country thing.
Or a country thing.
That's it.
Yeah, it's a rural America country thing, because people that were, you know, people that come from having nothing, a lot of self-made people are like that. My daddy came from nothing. You know, he had a sorry daddy and an amazing mama that had 2 other kids. They were his full-blooded brothers and brother and sister, but they all grew up real rough, didn't have nothing. And so when it got time for them to make a living in their own lives, you know, they knew what they didn't want to have. And they knew kind of what it took to have a little something.
Yeah.
And it's just people that grow up like that, you know, they're normally not going to make the same financial blunders over and over again that everybody else does, you know, living a $10,000 single wide trailer, driving a $60,000 AT4, that kind of stuff, you know? And so with that being said, I mean, that was one of those things that, like I said, Daddy always tried to, you know, teach us about that. I don't even know where I was going with that.
Well, it was, you were talking about, we started with talking about using a phone, and then the only overhead came when you were doing long form.
Overhead.
Right.
That's it. Yeah. That's it.
And your dad was involved in the grocery business,
yes.
right? There.
Yes.
So some of that may be personal, and some of it may have been his business experience too.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I mean, it's, you know, he wrote a list for me back 2 years. It was right before I got into social media. Cause I was struggling getting new clients, man. I was really struggling. I felt like I was working pretty hard, you know, trying to, and he wrote a list down. He said, and his main thing was overhead. Control your overhead.
Okay.
You know, he's a big believer in being debt free, and that way when the rainy days come and that cash flow slows down, if you have no debt or low debt, it's a lot easier to live, and you're not having to sell assets and sell things and really degrade and demean your life. And we have never been extravagant in the spending area or anything like that. But he was, he was always talking about overhead, and invest and, spend. Basically, his number one rule was kind of like what I think Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger said was, if you, over a long period of time, spend less than you make, you'll have something.
Right. It's kind of simple. It's kind of like losing weight. Really, when you get down to it, if less, if you're burning more calories than you are taking in, eventually you're going to lose some weight. Right. I mean, that's just kind of how it works.
That's right.
And it's similar on the money side.
Yeah.
Tell me, you touched on it a minute ago, but tell me briefly, like, about your military career. When did that happen, and kind of where was that in your life prior to and leading up to all this?
So when I was 2011, 2012, I was in 11th, 12th grade then, and I was wanting to play football somewhere, okay? But I was 5'11", 190 pounds, and run a 4.9. And if you look at any of the JUCO or Division I or anything like that on the football field, unless they're a punter, and I think the punters can do better than that on a lot of, they ain't out there. So I didn't want to go to college if I couldn't play ball. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I just wanted to be, known for being tough and, all this stuff. And I thought, well, what could, the Marines. Let me go into the Marines. So in 2013, I went and joined the Marine Corps, and I was in from 13 to 17, deployed a few times, and learned a lot. It was so funny too, because a lot of the guys in our units come from fatherless homes, or not my unit, but that too. But when in boot camp was always a culture shock for everybody. It's completely, especially in the Marine Corps, it's just very, very different. And a lot of guys that, just didn't have a strong male figure in their life growing up, man, these drill instructors scared them to death. And it was nerve-wracking at times, I'll tell you. But, people ask me about that, how it was when I got out, or got out of boot camp, that was. And I was like, dude, ain't none of them Neil Ellis. I wasn't scared of none of them. It was okay. Yeah. But I had to run a lot, and they screamed real loud and everything. Sometimes got a little handsy, but that's, But anyway, I was stationed in California, which sucked. I hated California. I hated that lifestyle. I didn't like the crowds that I was around out there. I loved the Marines that I was around, and I very rarely were around anybody else. Okay. But just, dude, you look, all this is what I was brought up in. They ain't got none of this out there. Yeah, right. So, I didn't have nothing to do but be in the field, work out, drink, fight, rotate. That was it, and just live that barracks Marine lifestyle, which is not very healthy over a long period of time. But anyway, I was in there from 13 to 17, and then, I got out. And then when me and my wife went to Starkville, transferred to Mississippi State in 2019, I joined the National Guard because those 2 years that I was out, man, and they talked about it a lot. I've heard a lot of vets talk about the transition from Marine Corps to civilian life and how hard it was. And I was like, man, these guys are just weak. They're pansies or whatever, that ain't going to be me. That first year,
tough,
dude. I got fired for getting into a fist fight at work with a guy. It was severe depression, just all this kind of stuff. And, you're not telling anybody anything. And I was like, man, I'm getting back in. Well, I went back to the Marines, and I couldn't get back in because one of the tattoos that I got right before I got out was out of regs, so they wouldn't let me back in.
Okay.
And then I was like, well, what about, what's next? And I was like, well, heck, I'm going to go Army Special Forces and go through the National Guard pipeline. And so I was with 20th Group Special Forces out of Grenada while I was going to train for that. And it's so funny, man, how the good Lord works and how he puts things where you need to be, here and there, but he puts things in obstacles in your life
where they need to
steer you. Because I was in 2020, right before COVID hit, I had a date for Airborne and 2 other schools with the Guard that was going to, help me once I got out of Mississippi State. I was going to go into the pipeline. And literally right there when COVID hit, all of that got canked.
Okay.
All of that training, the schoolhouse, everything got canked. And then I got into the insurance industry and financial industry, and I started making a little money to where I was making $1,000 a month, scraping by, started making about $3,000 a month. And I was like, holy cow, I'm rich, and I get to hunt whenever I want to. I get to be home. And so my mind started changing. I had like a 7-month break to where we couldn't drill, we couldn't train, nothing. And all I was doing was working and building my financial business. And I was like, the wheels were turning. I'm just sitting there going, maybe I have a future in this because this allows me a lot more freedom. I can give a good life to my family. And yeah, so I was in the Guard for 3 years then, from 2019 to 2021, May of 21. And I just let my contract run out and I focused on finance, and then that led me into social media where I am now.
Where you are now.
So
that is really fascinating. And as you were telling the story, if I back up and look at, like, from a distance, it looks like a guy who here's football, boom, you run into a brick wall. Here's military and that career, and eventually, boom, you just kind of run into a brick wall. Bunch of no's, tattoo, no. And then in the finance side, you kind of you learn how to handle a lot of no's.
yeah,
Like you had no told right to your face a bunch in a lot of different ways. And I think it's just interesting how it seems like those things all kind of informed your willingness to jump in there on the social media and go, it can't be any worse than, what's the worst? Like you said earlier, what's the worst that could happen? It really sort of informed what I was calling your courage, just to barrel off into it. And now here you are. Those things have kind of led you to where you are. It's fascinating to see that.
And I have to give credit where credit is due. And I hope that somebody with young kids can listen to this and apply this. Most of that credit the earthly credit, I would say, goes to my upbringing. Because my dad, I will never forget when I was 14 years old, he made us work. He made us buy our own vehicles, pay for our own insurance. He said, I rode the school bus every day to the last day of when I was a senior in high school. If you ain't got the money to pay for it, you've got an opportunity to work at the store and save money. If you can't pay for the truck, the insurance, and the gas, you can ride the bus. So he instilled a lot of that toughness in us early on, but I won't never forget, man. I think I had $4,000 or $5,000 in the bank when I was about 15. I had the truck paid for and everything, all that kind of stuff taken care of. Obviously, I'm at home, no overhead.
Mm-hmm.
And my buddy, close to where you were talking about you originally lived, about right across the lake from that place.
Okay.
He was selling for $1,500. He was selling a YZ 125 two-stroke, and I wanted it bad. And I said, Daddy, I want to go over and buy so-and-so's dirt bike. He said, no, you got one. You don't need it. And it ticked me off because, of course, I didn't say that. I was like, yes, sir. And about a week after that, me and him were in the truck riding, going somewhere. And he said, son, the reason that I tell you no is not because I know you don't have the means or we don't have the means or it wouldn't be fun or this and that. He said, but son, you simply need to be able to be disappointed and function. Because, and he pointed to somebody's house. He said, you see them right there? He said, they buy their kids everything they want. They got the new trucks, the new four-wheelers, the new tires. They've been in bankruptcy this many times doing this crap. And he said, but you watch them kids when they grow up. He said, they are going to struggle in their life with some things. And you may not hear them talk about it, but they're used to getting everything that they want. So when life hits them in the mouth like it does all of us and they get down and disappointed, they're going to have a hard time handling that. And like you're saying, you know, I've been hit with no and disappointment my whole life, and it never once has been a thought of I need to lay down and quit. It's always been, you know, keep going.
Yeah.
And that's not because I'm this tough dude or whatever. It's just I was blessed enough by God to be chosen to have a good mama and daddy that instilled a lot of that stuff in me.
Yeah.
So
that is, what a great way to phrase it too, that your dad phrased that. You need to be able to be disappointed and still function,
that's right.
as opposed to kind of going in a shell. You know, there's a sports analogy. You talking about high school football, and I played football, and there's some sports analogy in there also. You gotta be able to play well when you're behind by 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, you know, because you still got to play.
Yep.
You know, but it is fascinating. Okay. And so you look at where things are now, and some people might go, you know, if I had that many subscribers and views on TikTok and then on YouTube and then on Instagram, I've made it. Like, I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel? Do you feel like you've made it, or is there more out there? Like, what's
Lord,
next?
no. If I quit making videos, the money goes away. You know what I mean? It's I'm not at a point to where I can go get set on cruise and, you know, financially bills are paid and stuff like that. We got a lot of work to do, man. And it's I guess this perception is reality, but it's not always reality. I mean, there's always going to be things that, because you get to one level and you want to level up. You want to do a little better. You want to do, you know, because you move the line, you move your goal line, if you will. Because and I think every successful person, whatever successful means, I think everybody does that. You know, they make a goal for themselves and say, hey, I'd like to have this, or I'd like to get to this point, or whatever the case. And, you know, and then when they get there, they move it. But I'll say the biggest misconception is a follower number. With short form content, man, you have a lot of people who have a handful of videos go off and they'll rack up on the followers. And then you look at their page and their average video gets 5,000 views.
Yeah, right.
You know,
So
well,
it's
Lord,
consistency.
they don't get paid for the followers. You know, they get paid for the views. So they ain't making a lick of nothing.
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, I know that's probably a shallower answer, but I mean, that's, you know, because we're talking about the money side of things, but you know, when somebody looks at that and says, you know, if I had that, I'd have it made and all that kind of stuff, I would give anybody this advice. And I didn't come up with this. Alex Hormozy said this. I heard him say it about a year and a half. Well, it was last turkey season coming home from Kansas in May. I was listening to a video of his, and he said, if you make your goal the work, your goals will eventually come true and come to reality. So I would say that, you know, if you've got you know, my dream is to have, you know, 500 acres in the Delta. That's my dream. 500 acres in the Delta with a, you know, a 2,500, 3,000 square foot shop house, you know, and have just a massive, amazing deer camp like that. Next to some public. That way, if I ain't got any good deer, I can go and get on. That's right.
Walk over there.
And but you know, I would say figure out, you know, what it's going to take to get there. What that vehicle looks like. It may be real estate. It may be, you know, this business, that business, whatever the case. But you got to break it down to the week. You got to do what you've got to do every single week. Don't worry about next week. Heck, don't worry about tomorrow. You know, I just focus on what I've got to get done today. And obviously, if I'm going to be gone for a few days, I make sure that those few days are covered. But man, I'm not sitting here wondering, man, what's my views going to be like in April or May? What's my sponsorships going to look like next year? It's like all I can focus on is doing the work this week and making sure that my family's good. And other than that, I mean, dude, if you've seen my content, I could be canceled next year. You know what I'm saying? Like, so we're not even thinking about next year.
Right. That's
You
true.
know?
Well, and I think another way I don't forget who to, I wish I knew who to credit it, but somebody worded it this way: patience in the macro and then urgency in the micro. So that's what you're saying is a big picture, longer term. Yeah, it's big goals, but there's a lot of patience there. Meaning that patience is going to kind of drive the day to day where you're going to stick with it. But urgency in the micro, meaning today I got some urgency to get done what I got to get done today.
That's
and
right.
not settling until you put the work out there. I think that's another good way to word it.
That's right. That's it.
Well, you know, and I think it's one of those things too, Trent, where you've touched on younger people. There's younger people who will listen to this that they do want to be like Trent. And they want to do what Trent does.
Raise the bar.
You know,
Raise your bar.
You know, they see it as not glamorous is not the word.
Well, it sounds like a lot of fun.
Fun is what I'm like.
You know what I mean? Like,
fun.
like you see people on social media and they're, you know, making funny skits and they're making people laugh. And I think everybody thinks it's kind of funny. You know, I've been meaning to say this, but before I emailed you, or because we had someone that you know somebody from the agency that reached out to me and was like, "Hey, you ought to see if you can get Trent on." And when I looked up your stuff, I said, "Oh, I saw this guy's videos last week. He was making fun of his wife having plants on the house, which was so relatable to me because my fiance has plants all over the house. And like they're on top of the TV, they're in the sink, they're everywhere. And I was like, this is so relatable. But the other funny thing about that is when I saw that video, the first thing that I thought of was like, this guy's from Mississippi. Yeah. I knew that you were from Mississippi, and I was like, if you're not from Mississippi, you're either really close in Alabama or maybe somewhere in Louisiana. But like,
was it the accent?
I could tell from the accent, and I could tell from the attitude. Just all these little layers about it. And there's other people I've seen on social media where like I like in the first 5 seconds I could pick up. I'm like, I bet this guy's from Mississippi, and. I'd say like maybe 85% of the time I'm right. But I was right.
Funny you mention that because I feel like we do have something etched in our DNA in this state that we can just kind of. It's kind of like when you meet somebody or see somebody in the military, especially a lot of times, man. Unless they're older guys, like 60 plus. If I see a Marine somewhere, I can be like, he was in the Marine Corps. Yeah. What's up, brother? Where you from? And like 99% of the time.
Yeah, okay, so plants. What about throw pillows? You have a lot of throw pillows around the house?
Man, I have been so blessed to not have a pillow wife. Bree is not a pillow wife. Okay. She's a plant wife, which I will. I've talked a lot of crap on her plants on those skits. She has come a long way because she used to kill every plant that she would buy. And now I wish she'd kill half of them because it's like, it looks like between our carport and from there to our kitchen, it's nothing but a darn jungle.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
well,
but I got taxidermy everywhere, so I guess it kind of evens out.
Is that right? Yeah. It evens out.
For every deer head you get, she's got to get a plant or.
Oh, I wish the ratio was like that. Yeah.
That's great. Lastly, how do you come up with all the ideas, like day to day, the topics? Do you ever? I just wondered if people ever suggest, "Hey, Trent, you got to do, DM." Hey,
yeah, no, I get those. A lot of times I don't do them because they're bad or they're
bad ideas.
Yeah, bad ideas or like I've actually used in the last year and a half. Probably 3 of those. And I've done them in a story form. I've done them to where, hey, somebody messaged me and this is what I did like 2 videos of those to where I'd read a story that they would tell, and, but no, I typically, man, just coming up from a crazy bloodline, brother, and living in Mississippi, growing up in the sticks. I mean, and you said it earlier, having the guts to do this, man, there's so many guys that are so much funnier than me that I know of, that you know of.
We all do, yeah.
That, they're out there and they just, I guess, either don't care to start putting stuff up or just kind of afraid that, Joe Schmo down the road's going to point and laugh and, say he ain't going to go nowhere. Yeah. But just growing up in my area, man, around my family and friends and everything, it's content for for days.
That's great.
That's
Great.
Yeah.
So, for someone listening, that this is their introduction to you. Like I said, I mean, most people listening, they probably already do follow you somewhere, but if they don't, where do they go? Tell them those handles.
Golly, anywhere. It's my name, Trent Ellis, on every platform except Instagram, and it's Trent_Ellis21 on Instagram.
Okay.
So YouTube, Facebook, TikTok. I just got Snapchat. I'm gonna start posting to that too.
Okay.
So I think that's Trent Ellis, or maybe TM Ellis. It's an old one, but
Okay.
yeah.
You look for Trent Ellis. You'll find him pretty much everywhere you look. And listen, congrats on the success. It's a real pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you,
we
man.
could go on, and this has been fun. And so Chip will probably call you back one of these days and see if you got any more time you can squeeze us in down the line.
Man, yeah, I'll be here.
That's great. Trent, thank you.
Thank y'all.
From Mantachi to the big time on social media, Trent Ellis here on the show. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you outdoors.